J. Bentley, President of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Xi Sigma Omega Chapter, that serves the constituents of Upper Montgomery County, Maryland. On behalf of the 122 members of Xi Sigma Omega Chapter, let me be the first person tonight to impress upon you the importance of the arts, specifically the impact made on the Black community. Under the leadership of Dr. Glenda Glover, International President and CEO of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, we have focused on the arts as part of the exemplifying excellence through sustainable service administration. Our goal is to expose students to arts enrichment and culture by focusing on visual and performing arts and by showcasing talent throughout the exploration of writers, entertainers, and various other artists. It is imperative that we support Black arts, music, theater, performers, and organizations. We must also ensure that our youth engage in enjoying and participating in visual and performing art to explore and develop their own talents and interests. The diversity of creativity and talent that Black artists across the diaspora have brought to the arts have influenced art, music, and theater all around the world. Xi Sigma Omega Chapter is proud to announce that we are making a donation of $800 to the Young Artists of America Scholarship to support Black, Indigenous students of color to pursue courses in music, drama, and the performing arts. Tonight's performance is Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies. Duke Ellington was one of the most important creative forces in the music of the 20th century, influential on classical music, popular music, and jazz. Native of Washington, D.C., he led a career in Harlem, New York as a composer and band leader during the Harlem Renaissance. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this evening's festivities. As we move forward with our program, let me introduce you now to Leanne Dempsey, Dramaturg, Youth Artists of America, who will facilitate tonight's panel. Leanne?
Thank you so much, Dr. Bentley, and good evening to everyone. I'm Leanne Dempsey, as Dr. Bentley mentioned, and I was the resident dramaturg for YA's production of Sophisticated Ladies. Thank you for joining us for this evening's conversation celebrating Black theater. So as a dramaturg, I was what I would call the history nerd of the show. I looked to the past to inform our present and to help the students and the creative team understand the context of what the show is all about. In the same way, I think a little bit of history will help set the stage for this evening and for today's conversation. So go back with me. For a little more than 100 years, the 1918 flu pandemic infected around 500 million people, about a third of the world's population at that time. The 4 waves of this pandemic lasted from February 1918 to April 1920 and resulted in tens of thousands of lives lost. But what followed was a decade characterized by economic and cultural prosperity in the United States. It was called the Roaring Twenties. We saw an explosion of Black arts. Duke Ellington, the Harlem Renaissance. In Washington, D.C., Black Broadway emerged. Shout out to U Street. The work of that time was historic, and it's still revered today. And so now come back with me to 2021, where there are so many parallels to our present day situation, such as the hopeful end of a pandemic, sound familiar? New technologies, political polarization, and competing global markets. Those parallels have many people asking if we're about to come upon a new renaissance in the Black theater. So today, we're speaking with experts who can help shed some light on this question. I am joined first by Maria Manuela Goyanes. Maria is the artistic director of Woolly Mammoth Theater Company in Washington, D.C., Prior to that, she was the director of producing and artistic planning at the Public Theater, where she managed some of the theater's most celebrated productions, including Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Maria is a Brown University graduate, a first-generation Latinx American, and she was born to parents who emigrated from the Dominican Republic and Spain. She was raised in Jamaica, Queens, and has a collection of hoop earrings to prove it. Our next panelist is Bakari Wilder. Bakari is an award-winning performer, internationally known for starring in the Broadway musical, Bring the Noise, Bring the Funk. Bakari's dancing has delighted audiences around the world in places such as the Kennedy Center, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, France, Africa, Brazil, Germany, Japan, and Russia. He is a graduate of the University of Maryland at College Park, go Terps, and he shares his knowledge of tap dancing through his role as Assistant Artistic Director of the Washington, D.C. based companies Capital Tap and District Tap. He will be receiving the 2021 Hoofer Award by the American Tap Dance Foundation at the New York City Tap Dance Festival this July. Bakari is also our honored director of the production you will see this evening, A Sophisticated Ladies. Our third and final panelist for this evening is Kevin Mcallister. Kevin is a two-time Helen Hayes award-winning actor and a six-time nominee. He is the artistic director of ArtsCentric. He made his Broadway debut in the hit musical Come From Away and will soon be seen in the upcoming revival of Caroline or Change at Roundabout Theater Company this fall. Get your tickets, everybody. He is also an adjunct professor at both Howard University and Catholic University of America, and the director of curated programming and BIPOC artist advocate at the Olney Theater Center in Olney, Maryland. Thank you all for being here. And those of you that are listening in on our conversation, just as a reminder, we will take questions at the end of our conversation, and you can start sending your questions in at any time. You're going to use that Q&A function in the Zoom. So just make sure it's the Q&A function instead of the chat function. All right, everyone. So let's just get started. Welcome, panelists. It's so exciting to have you on today. And I just want to open things up with the question for everyone. And it's, what does a new renaissance in Black theater even mean to you? Have we reached an inflection point now where the new renaissance actually becomes possible? What do you think? Go for it, Bakari.
Not sure who wants to go first.
Yeah.
I thank you, Leanne, for the prep earlier, because it really helped me to think about that. Even the history you gave about the flu epidemic, and in parallel to what's going on now. New Renaissance. Well, first of all, I honestly feel as though that what we saw in the past, and as far as performers, tap dancers in particular, from what I'm talking about, I don't think we can quite match what the greatness. We talk about people like the Nicholas brothers,
Yeah.
Fred Astaire, to Jimmy Slide, Gregory Hines, Lon Chaney, Chuck Green, Buster Brown, all the Hoofers and the Copacetic to Bill Robinson. They are and will always be, and pardon me for not mentioning Mabel Lee, and all the other great female dancers of that same era. They will always be our legends that we have to look at and revere and should continue to study. And the other interesting thing is that's at a time in my mind where they grabbed hold of these arts in a way in which we do a little differently. There's classes now. We
Right.
educated. These people were coming from the streets and off slave ships, and then teaching it and pushing it along. There wasn't that whole classroom structure at the time, you know, or Fayard was teaching it to his brother Harold, you know. And so just the way in which things were done, you know, I think that's where the difference is. But yes, at the same time, if we were to keep to honoring and taking in some of that information that was set up for us to move on and to probably build on as well in our own way, I'm sure this could very well be an era where we can continue to push forward and open up new doors, and therefore, you know, set up a new renaissance, you know, in that regard.
Thank you. Maria, I kind of see you clicking in. Go for it.
I was gonna let Kevin speak because I saw him. Go ahead, Kevin. You unmuted.
I love this game. I was gonna say, I think Bakari is totally right. I think there is an element of honoring the past and also celebrating what the future can be and making sure that we're laying the foundation to ensure that the future is actually what we want it to be. I think we have found that this pandemic has forced a lot of us to re-examine. It has forced a lot of Black voices to take the lid off and kind of scream as loud as possible to release all the tension, to let go of all the anxiety, of all the pain and all the hurt. I include myself in that as being an actor, an administrator, a director, a creator. You know, it's interesting being on all sides of things and learning that there's damage everywhere. You know what I mean? And understanding what we as artists and creatives, be it administratively or on the performance side, need to do to rectify that damage before we can build a new house. Because if we try to build a new structure on everything that's damaged, it's only going to come crashing down in a few years anyway. So this new renaissance that I think is happening is because we have not been forced to be in the same room and bear the brunt of people looking at us when we feel like we're backed in a corner, when we feel like we want to say something, but we can't because of the politics associated with, or you're afraid of losing your job, or you're afraid of backlash of not being cast at something, you know? So now that you're in your own space and you're gathered around the voices that love and support you, you kind of find that power to kind of be who you need to be. I've found that this year has really given me the power to take care of myself in ways I didn't have time to do before. I've really kind of been able to settle into what kind of artistry do you want to share? What kind of artistry do you want to take in? You know what I mean? All of us now have the option to click link or click stream or click like and really allow that to be an extension of who we are. But I do think the arts are in a place now where we have to do better. We have to analyze why there are so many stories of African Americans that are not being told or directed or produced by African Americans. But on the same token, on the flip side, we don't have any African Americans who are allowed to direct stories that don't look like them. So there's always that, you know, I've never heard of a Black production of Our Town that, you know, or let alone a Black director leading an all-white production of Our Town. So there's a fine line that we're walking, and I'm hoping that this year gives everyone the power to say, hey, I acknowledge that line and I'm stepping over it. Because if we don't, we're all just going to be stuck in this cycle that we're in, where we feel like I've got to be liked in order to survive in this industry. I've got to be personable. I've got to be, you know, friendly when I don't feel like. When someone has said something that offends me, I've got to sit quietly. And I think if we continue on this trajectory, then I think the world in and of itself is a better place. I think everyone who comes in to see a show now sees a young Puerto Rican Cinderella and understands how that makes sense, because there are people in the production team who have supported this storyline. But without those huge, and I don't even want to call them leaps of faith, I just leaps of understanding, or call, you know, getting to know culture and getting to understand why it's relevant and why it's necessary. We're kind of going to be stuck in this this goo that I think we're coming out of in our own way. But yeah, I do think it's happening. I just want to make sure that we as a collective of all colors, cultures, classes are actively moving forward together to say that, hey, this person demands just as much as I should demand, and this person should have just as much as I have. Because until we get to that place, it's a power struggle forever, you know.
I want to jump in on that. I mean, thank you. And just to say, I'm so happy to be on this panel with you both. Bakari, I got to the public after Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, but the legend of Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk is still with me. I was in those walls of that theater for so long. So I just want to say that to you. And Kevin, I've heard nothing but amazing things about you and your work at Olney, et cetera. So I feel really lucky to be here on this panel with you all. I just want to pick up on what you're talking about power, because I think that this is something that when I think about the Renaissance, I have a little bit of trouble with, right? Because the fact of the matter is, the great art and the great work has been there, right? Y'all have been there, right? These amazing Black artists, this talent has been there. And so to me, this is about actually changing who the gatekeepers are. And so for me, this is where I'm actually really interested in what's happening in terms of artists of color taking over certain positions, but also advocating for not just cultural equity, like representation on stage, but also off stage, right? So for me, I see like that Renaissance, or, you know, to me looks like Black Theater United. It looks like Broadway Advocacy Coalition. It looks like the Black Theater Coalition. It looks like Black artists who are taking matters into their own hands and saying, you know what, enough is enough. And we're going to actually say it's not enough to have one production that is like, you know, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof with actors from, you know, Black actors specifically. Amazing production, really, really brilliant, but like, it doesn't have to only be one. Folks, you know, the Black experience is not a monolithic experience, and it has many, many, many facets. And so how do those gatekeepers, like, and those gatekeepers are on so many levels, right? Casting directors, press representatives, all of these people that actually have a lot of power to influence the future of someone's career and life. And so how do we actually think about cultural representation in that way? And to me, what I see as the Renaissance is folks are actually really sort of saying like, no, we're going to collectively band together, form these coalitions that are not going to be at odds with each other. There's so many of them, but they are sister organizations actually moving together to try and actually do some dismantling. Because the thing about the Renaissance, right? They had the wealthy patrons and stuff. That's just keeping up the supremacy, the white supremacy that we've been, we're trying to actually change, right? So that's what I've been thinking about. And it really dovetails with what it is y'all have been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, everybody. I think there's a lot of interesting conversation that's starting to come up even about structure, accessibility. Bakari, you brought up something really interesting just about how people learned how to do the arts, right? And how classes are a great thing, right? Dance classes, acting classes, but they also kind of create a barrier right now. Whereas a lot of our hoofers and our tap dancers and our performers really learn from something being passed on, or by watching, or by being around something, but it didn't necessarily cost money to do the art form itself. And it's really interesting too with the Black theater, just movements in general. We have this Harlem Renaissance, but we know as we continue through a couple more decades, we're going to get to the Black arts movement, right? We're going to start to get a huge group of artists there. And so there's an interesting question that I want to ask now is about the role and the necessity of Black theater. And just, can you talk a little bit about how you have seen personally, or just historically, the impact of Black theater and Black artists on community building, on education, on the economy? What have you seen in your experience, or just historically, about the necessity of Black theater in our industry? And I'll see what game you want to play on this one, right? So go for it. Is it you, Kev? Go for it.
Sure. I would say on the acting side of my career, I have been fortunate enough in both a positive and a negative way to play roles that are necessarily deemed white, I guess, for lack of better phrasing. I have been privileged enough, which is not necessarily a privilege, but I have been offered the opportunities to play roles that are usually not reserved for people who look like me, I'll put it that way. That has been both harrowing and empowering experience. That has been a fortuitous yet a very degrading experience at times, and that has left me in the middle in terms of what it is to advance stories that are not necessarily my own, if that makes sense. So as an actor, I'm now analyzing every room I go into, and I'm analyzing every offer that's given to me, and I'm asking for clarity as to why I'm being offered this role, and what are we saying with me being in this role? What are we saying to the community by me being in this role? What is the audience coming away with from me being in this role? Because you as an actor know that you take off a costume and sometimes you leave it behind in the dressing room. But then there's that time where you walk out when you're going to your car and the audience reminds you of the experience they took in or, you know, were left with. And sometimes that can be a very positive experience. Sometimes they can say things that can really just gut you, and they don't mean anything by it. It's just, you know, I remember doing a show, and this is where I was playing, I can't remember the character's name, but I was playing a slave in the show for, I think the show, his name was actually like Slave One. So we had arguments about that. But got in 2 weeks after a show, I got a package in my dressing room. And it was a gift from an audience member who said that she was so moved by my performance that she wanted me to have a gift. And I opened the package, and it was a book on America's most prolific slaves. And I remember getting the book and kind of being caught in the middle of what that was supposed to say. Like, am I playing a good slave? Is that what we're saying? And if that is what we mean, is that a good thing? You know, so there's a lot of things that happen internally when you're playing roles that deal with the Black experience, for one, because most of them are written in the Black trauma experience. So a lot of it comes from what Black people are losing or what Black people are destroying to gain. And then there's the other line of what is empowering doesn't get often produced because it doesn't bring that same gut-wrenching experience for an audience member, you know? So we, as Black creatives, have to be responsible for what we produce, because I found that when it's done right, it changes every mind. It aligns every culture. It brings about so much connection in communities. It brings about so much fundraising. It brings about people invested in storytelling. It brings about people who have not been experienced or attended theater are usually left with something that motivates them to sew into, be it into that theater, be it into that community. But the Black experience is so limited in most theaters. It's usually a drop in the bucket, one production, maybe 1.5 if you're lucky, but usually around February, as we all know. But I think the idea of what we are and what we can offer to the community is changing, which is why I started ArtsCentric in Baltimore, because it's a Black-run theater company that focuses on Black empowerment. So we do Black stories, we write Black ballets for kids who are just interested in doing more Black dance. We write, you know, we do shows that are focused on elevating female Black songwriters. So it's really about just not only us taking advantage of having these opportunities to create things for ourselves, but it's also about the community is so much better when we do it for ourselves, and we build infrastructures that our children can actually invest in, and their children's children and their neighbors' children can invest in.
It reminds me of what is said to you before you get on the elevator at the Smithsonian on African American culture and history, where they say, this is just a reminder that Black history is American history. And it's a mixed group that's standing there about to get on that elevator. And it's almost a shock because you're not used to someone validating the Black story of America in America to also be the story of America itself. And so this uniting sense that you're speaking about, Kevin, makes sense. Like you, and I love what you said, when it's done well, it affects everybody, right? And it affects everyone in a positive way, because it's a story, it's a history that has not been told, right? And I'm curious with Maria and Bakari, how also, I mean, Kevin just brought up Baltimore. Let's talk about the heart of DC in and of itself, and how we see, Black theater, Black performing arts as well, U Street even, right? How do you see that being impactful, even in this DC local area?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I have to lift up Jennifer Nelson and the African Continuum Theater and the work that she did in that space. And frankly, there was a host of national theaters like that, right? Crossroads Theater is another one, the amazing, Woody King and and Negro Ensemble Theater before that. Like, it's just like, it's so rich. And when I look at DC now, I want to lift Restoration Stage, and I want to lift DC Black Repertory Theater. I want to lift like the Howard Players. I want to lift like all of these amazing Black talent that, against all odds, frankly, because it's not like the dollars are flowing their way in terms of grants and foundation support. I'm hoping that that's actually changing now. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, is the actually it's happening through people, Black philanthropists and people and leaders in that sector, like Darren Walker at the Ford Foundation, creating a program like America's Cultural Treasures, and actually giving money to Black-led organizations like Penumbra Theater in Minneapolis to actually, they have a huge strategic plan. They've changed into the Center for Racial Healing, where essentially they're doing theater and community building and advocacy. These are models that are the models of the future. They are the vanguard for our field. And, Jamil Jude is doing that, right? At Kenny Leon's True Colors. So I mean, and I can go on and on and on. And I wish that there was, I hope that actually that the resources actually become more equitable in terms of philanthropic dollars, because they just haven't been. And I think that, to me, a lot of what the Ford Foundation is doing, the Mellon Foundation, and other large national foundations is realizing that and needing to actually change that now. So that also feels like that is changing. There is one other person who I want to mention, because I was thinking about this question, is Kathy Perkins, who is a Black female lighting designer. And I just want to put in the chat her website, because one of the things that she has done, and she has taken it upon herself, is because when she was studying lighting design in the 70s and 80s, she didn't know who to turn to. She didn't know who was working and who was actually making those inroads in the field. So she took it upon herself to publish, sometimes self-publish, anthologies of Black plays, anthology, like actually writing down the people who have written those plays, who are the designers who've made those plays, because that history felt to her like it was lost. And so I want everybody to go to that site. I want everybody to buy those books. I want everybody to, those are theater history, you know what I mean? That need to also be taught to us.
Yeah, I'd like to point out one of my great teachers, Carol Foster, who ran a company called DC Youth Ensemble in Washington, D.C. And that's where I get my discipline, in the arts, structure from. I also have teachers like Yvonne Edwards and Renee Krythen, who put me on to a lot of the legends that some are even from, like Buster Brown and Baby Lawrence, that are from the Baltimore area. I didn't even know that, we had legends in the DC metropolitan area, at a time where tap was very rich and people were coming through. It was just part of the Chitlin circuit, dancing, through DC. And I was fortunate enough at that time, a lot of the artists like Gregory Hines and LaVon Robinson from Philadelphia would come down to the area. And and share their artwork, and that was definitely a form of education that I received earlier, and intend to pass along the same way that they did.
Yeah, I mean, there's just such a, I was even astounded. Like, it's very interesting, right? When you, Bakari, when you say, you know, I didn't even know there were legends that came from this area, you know? And so we say Black Broadway, and usually we say it in a general sense. But this evening we are saying, no, Black Broadway. In the 1920s, U Street was called Black Broadway, right? And the Lincoln Center opened in 1922, you know? So there's just so much history in this area and so much potential. And that's where I would just want to lead us to before we take a few questions, is just what are you hopeful for in the future? And that might lead to you thinking about some of the youth that some of you work with, or even, you know, Maria, you were talking about, you know, what you are doing now in your position to look forward into the future in regards to issues on equity. But what are you hopeful for in this potentially, hopefully, new renaissance in theater, especially in the DC metropolitan area? And anyone can take that to begin with. Go for it, Bakari. I see you.
You know, I'm big on history and tradition, so I work with two companies and Capital Tap and District Tap under the direction of Lisa Swinton Eppert, and she and I both are really about building the youth up, you know, so that they have a strong foundation. They're extremely knowledgeable about the art that they do, and from there, you know, feel the confidence to make it their own and to build off of that. But we really hold this belief in studying, you know, the artists that came before us, you know, and getting inside of their shoes the best way we can. And thankfully, we have routines that we hold on to that are shared throughout the tap dance community that allow us to do that. And so they will have that to pass along to the next generation, along with, again, empowering them to continue to build on this timeless, endless art form. And yeah.
I love the idea of passing it on. Awesome.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say, like, there are some amazing leaders in the DC art scene. I was actually thinking about Kahina Hines at the Dance Institute of Washington, and some other folks who are doing just incredible work. I had mentioned Restoration Stage and Courtney Baker Oliver. For me, because of my particular vantage point as an artistic director, I'm trying to figure out how to work on just the power dynamics, like sharing power, sharing leadership, that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that I'm really hopeful for is to actually, you know, it's often been called like a pipeline issue of, like, you know, a job is open and, you know, there are not enough candidates of color, et cetera, whatever, who are applying for it. And I don't see it that way. And so I think that they have, you know, it's more about being welcome in that space, and actually, like, what inclusivity looks like in a culture, you know? And so one of the things that I'm really have been thrilled about and really excited about for Woolly is we started this partnership with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Luis Miranda called the Miranda Family Fellows, where we actually have opportunities for entry-level paid positions. They get the full-time salary, housing stipend, health benefits, et cetera, to try and actually disrupt some of the dynamics that happen with, like, you know, the homogeneity of development departments, the production crew, the marketing departments, the finance departments. And so these young people are coming in, oh OMG. They are amazing. And I literally am like, I mean, they just started in March, Sitlali, Autumn, and Jeremy. They are fire, you know, and I know that they're going to take over these jobs in the future. So we're working to try and make it so that actually we have these positions in every single department at Woolley. And I'd like to see this happen for all of the other major theaters in town where it's paid and we actually help historically underrepresented communities in the backstage and technical fields in our work get the opportunities they need to then lead in DC.
And I would just say I'm most hopeful for literally everything at this point. There's just the belief that we can only go up from here. But most assuredly, just the idea that there's now everyone's eye is on those who are not making room at the table. And the expectation that there is this question that's going to be thrown at everyone, like, why can't you do more? And I think that's a phenomenal thing because we all can. I don't think it's going to be easy. In fact, you know, working with a lot of like with Olney and things, we're learning that everything we want to do is tangible, it's feasible, but it's just how. And taking the time to figure out the how, I think is what I'm always going to be challenging anyone I come across. Like, how are we going to do better? How do we get access? How do we let people know? How do we build up? How do we empower? So I'm most excited about literally everything because there's no reason for anyone not to be accountable at this point for making this industry so much better.
Yeah, when we talk about the future, I mean, we're talking obviously about ourselves as we move into that, obviously, but we also are talking about our children, right? We're talking about the young artists, the young artists of color, Indigenous people of color, who are coming up into this industry and looking to us as leaders in the industry. And so we have a question that aligns with that. And the question comes from Sandy. And Sandy asks, what are your thoughts about many schools removing the arts from their curriculum because of budget cuts?
Yeah, so I mean, look, my feeling is that the theater, I can only speak for my industry, and you know, the theater, I have to do a better job and in making the case and talking about it to our legislative officials, to our city officials, et cetera, about what actually the arts curriculum, theater, et cetera, whatever, how that actually influences and changes the course of a young person's life, whether or not they go into the theater or not, right? And my gut is, or my sense of it is that it's about talking about it in different ways than just economic drivers, right? Because I feel like it puts us in relationship to all of these bigger corporations and other things if we're basically talking about how much money we're bringing to the table, which is useful for advocacy on the federal level for like PPP loans and other things like that. But on the education level, it's actually doing talking about how that kid actually taking that dance class, that tap class, became this person now who is the successful CEO or successful, et cetera, and how that influenced that trajectory. I just don't know that we do that enough. I don't know that we know how to talk about it enough. And a little bit of this is why I wanted to bring Kathy Perkins into this space, because it's not written down. You know, we're not in the evaluation of that, the being able to actually sort of speak to that. We're not doing the things that like pharmaceutical companies do, which is basically like get study after study after study after study to basically say, this is why you should take this and do this. How do we do that for the arts? How do we do that for the theater, especially around theater education, and bring actually people on both sides of the aisle along to that journey? This is about citizenry. This is about advocacy. This is about talking to people and elected officials and making that case, in my view.
No, I totally agree. Right now we see only pockets. I know people who've made it in the system here and there, and it's extremely beneficial, you know. But to really, Maria, what you're saying, advocate for it, you know, even, you know, bring it forth as a study, even to prove, you know, intellectually how there's so much math involved in tap dancing and music, making music, period, you know, and the science behind adding and why is that not, why do not enough people know that? There does need, I completely agree that there needs to be a movement, since it's not being quite understood.
I was gonna say I am living proof of that, that it works. I am from Detroit, Michigan. Okay, so I grew up in Detroit in the 80s and 90s. Okay, so you know when your city is literally the most dangerous city in America year after year after year after year. So the idea of finding the arts and what it did for me in terms of just giving me a sense of like belonging, I guess is a good way to put it. Just giving me a sense of like, hey, it's okay to create. It's okay to invest in making your own kind of music and in figuring out what makes you you. It's life changing. It literally is. The arts save lives. I can attest to so many people who are here because of what we do. People who are saved because they have seen what we do, and people who want this to go on but don't necessarily know how. So I'm always interested in whatever we can do to bring this to a larger spectrum and let people know that this is a problem, and let parents know that we all need to fight together to try to keep these programs active, because it may not affect your child, but the child sitting next to them is just as important, you know. So
Yeah, and our final question before we actually do have to end our wonderful discussion this evening as we move into viewing the show comes from Juanita, and Juanita brings up a great question that says, does anyone feel that mainstream music, for example, hip hop, has caused a shift in the appreciation of the arts and theater? And I would even add to that in saying, do you see that even drawing a new audience? Or perhaps younger students into the theater. And she says, if so, what could be done to promote theater and traditional arts to become a solidified platform again? Once upon a time, theater used to be that statement of status quo, used to be an evening to look forward to. So how do we see hip hop and other mainstream music perhaps influencing, or how do you see that influencing a shift in how we appreciate the arts and theater?
Well, I'm a hip hop head. um, but at the same time, you know, my the legends that I admire and look up to and study from, I mean, their hip hop was jazz, you know, so I'm heavy into their music as well. I think with a well-rounded a vocabulary of music is always healthy. You know, hip hop definitely today brings out a newness, which I think is nothing wrong with at all. A change is good. You know, there's nothing wrong with peeking back and seeing, you know, where things came from, or what inspired hip hop, or realize that these are kind of the same people, and things kind of just migrated and moved a little bit. We're kind of talking about the same issues. Yeah, I think I just wanted to say I'm a hip hop head, but really, if from the question, I gathered it being a sense of a shift from the type of theater it was before and versus now. what I do know for sure is our attention span today is a lot shorter. So staying in the theater long enough that these kids today on their TikTok and everything, I mean, it is fast with it. So I I think the theater is great for everybody, and that all should come. And it might just take hip hop or something like that to draw people in for or even a shifting of some of the classical pieces, you know, which is what we typically do now, to invite and bring to enlarge our audience, you know, so to say. Bringing the noise, bringing the funk. That was something out of nowhere. It wasn't. We weren't really copying. We weren't copying much, but I mean, that's just how things kind of move, and brought the funk to Broadway. So I think that's possible. I think it's possible for this generation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, with about a minute left, Maria and Kevin, do you have anything to add to that question?
Oh, I was going to say, I think that hip hop and stuff has already started to find its way into theater. I mean, one of the most popular musicals of all time is Hamilton right now, which has found a way to bridge history and culture and reimagine casting and hip hop, and found a way to reach literally everyone. So I think when the past meets the present and invites the future and puts it all on stage, like literally everyone is excited to get on board with that.
And hip hop really also helps attention spans, just to say, because it crams so much information in such a small amount of time. And so I actually think it's a great recipe.
Yes, I can actually attest to that. I do know that there are high schoolers using Hamilton to study for their AP US history exams now. So I know that it actually is very useful on education. And what just resonates with me, just to bring our conversation to a close, Kevin, you just said finding our way. And I think that is really overall where we are right now as an industry, but also just Black arts, Black theater. If we're finding our way. And to be honest, you know, I don't think that Duke Ellington and Zora Neale Hurston and all of our Langston Hughes, I don't think that they saw themselves as a renaissance while they were in it. I think they saw themselves as finding their way. And then when we looked back, we said, whoa, look at that. Look what they just did. So, you know, hopefully, you know, when we look back at this time that we're all going through, we look back again and we see, oh, that was a renaissance again. So here's to finding our way, and to the future generations of young people that we are about to view in a few minutes, just being able to, like you just said, it's Sankofa, right? Bakari, go back and get it, right? Bringing our children back, showing them the past to bring them forward. And I'm excited to be able to show everyone here what that looks like even this evening as we watch Sophisticated Ladies. So Maria, Bakari, Kevin, thank you immensely for your contributions to tonight's conversation. Please have a great evening, and we just look forward to you viewing, and Kevin and Bakari, of course, viewing again, Sophisticated Ladies this evening. Thank you, everyone. If we can do a virtual applause for our panelists this evening. And with that, everybody, thank you so much for just being wonderful viewers of our panel tonight. I have the pleasure to introduce the president of the board of directors for the Young Artists of America. So if you can join in with me in just welcoming Ollen Douglas to our stage. Ollen, welcome, and we can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Leanne. And before I start, I just wanted to say that was a wonderful panel. As someone who's not particularly artistic myself, I have great appreciation for artists, and to hear that panel was just awesome. So thank you all. Again, my name is Ollen Douglas. I am the board president of Young Artists of America, or YAA. Really excited to be here for this collaborative celebration of diversity in theater. I want to thank our partners at Alpha Kappa Alpha for helping to make this evening possible. We couldn't have done it without you, and really appreciate all that you do. YAA promotes diversity in theater through high caliber storytelling that often gives young artists opportunities to explore in a constructive and collaborative environment themes about race, equity, and disparity. Through these works, students experience musical theater narratives through a broad spectrum of voices, some of those which are underrepresented relative to their contributions to the arts. In years past, I have watched with pride as my own child, now a YAA alum and a theater arts college student, participated in both Parade and Ragtime, but also In the Heights and other musicals that directly explore issues of inequity in race, class, and gender. YAA approached these stories with openness, with sensitivity, and with the care that they warrant. For Parade and Ragtime and Sophisticated Ladies, we brought in experts to provide context and set the stage for thoughtful rehearsals and performances. Last fall, as YAA prepared to celebrate the music of Duke Ellington in the Harlem Renaissance with our virtual production of Sophisticated Ladies, we launched a new YAA BIPOC Scholarship Fund to improve access to our programming and elevate awareness of the talent that we all know is in our communities. The new scholarship fund helps YAA discover those promising and deserving musical theater artists among students of color in the National Capital Region. The financial support removes economic barriers to participation and opens doors to train and perform at world-class venues like our home stage at Strathmore. The performance tonight was produced by YAA with artistic contributions from a diverse group of local arts organizations, some of them represented tonight, including ArtsCentric of Baltimore, Capital Tap of Washington, D.C., and Divine Dance Institute of Capitol Heights, Maryland. As you watch the performance, we hope that you will consider making a donation to the YAA BIPOC Scholarship Fund. I personally will be walking the talk and renewing my support of the scholarship. And as a special incentive, longtime YAA supporters Ed Grossman and Rochelle Stanfield have generously offered to match dollar for dollar every donation made tonight up to $2,000. So for every dollar you give tonight, the scholarship fund receives $2. So please join us in supporting the next generation of outstanding performing artists. And if you have kids with a strong interest in musical theater, I highly recommend YAA's Summer Arts Intensive Summer Camp. It's just outstanding. You can learn more at yaa.org. And of course, scholarship money is available. And now I want you to take a moment and gather your ingredients and follow along with Tiki Aiku, our guest bartender, who will help us mix a refreshing bourbon peach smash.
Hi, my name is Tiki Aiku, and when I'm not making donuts for Galaxy Donuts, I also like to do a bit of bartending. And so I'm so happy to be with you here remotely as you all do this. So I understand you're doing a Prohibition era event tonight. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And so I know that the Roaring 20s and 30s were known for the Prohibition, and gin was kind of the drink, but also what people don't realize is that bourbon was very popular too, and whiskey. Now, today we're going to make a bourbon peach smash, but before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about one of my favorite whiskeys that we're going to use. It's called Uncle Nearest. There you go. That's for you. Uncle Nearest is a very interesting, has an interesting story. So normally when you think about whiskey or Tennessee whiskey, you think about what? Jack Daniels, exactly. So let me tell you a little something about that. I want to introduce you to a man, if you don't already know him, named Nathan Nearest Green. Now, he was a slave on a farm in Lynchburg, Tennessee, but he was known for the quality and the taste of his whiskey. So he was known as far as Huntsville and Nashville, and that's a big deal back then because he started about in the 1840s, 1850s. Now here's where it gets interesting. In 1850, he was made to work with a young orphan boy named Jack Daniels. Now, first Jack worked with Uncle Nearest, as everybody called him, and then he ended up working with Uncle Nearest's son, George. And if you Google it, there's actually a picture of George sitting with Jack Daniels around the 1900s. Now, many people know Jack Daniels as the godfather of whiskey. Now, it's an open secret in the industry that the real godfather of whiskey is actually Uncle Nearest. There are only a few in Whiskey County who won't actually admit that, and that without Uncle Nearest, there would be no Jack Daniels. So a few years ago, a Black woman named Fawn Weaver saw an article that led her to research Uncle Nearest. And through her work in 2017, she co-founded the Uncle Nearest Distillery, becoming the first woman and the first Black woman to own a distillery. So I love Uncle Nearest whiskey. They make it in 3 kinds. They make a 1884, which is a little lower proof. They make the 1856, which is my favorite. And they make an 1820, which is their special one that I haven't been able to get my hands on yet. But when I do, you know I'm going to try it. So today we're making a bourbon peach smash. You're going to need, now I have a bunch of bartending tools, but you just use whatever it is. There's no perfect in pandemic. So we're all doing this together. You're going to need a glass of ice. That one should be easy. I personally have a shaker. If you don't have a shaker, you can use a stir or a really big spoon. All that's cool. I have a muddler. Again, no muddler, use the back of a spoon. And we're gonna have some mint, some peaches, and heavy syrup. And the heavy syrup is important. Here's why. The drink calls for simple syrup. Now, if you have simple syrup laying around the house, I don't. But if you do have it laying around the house, you can use that. If you're trying to cut a few calories, I use Splenda sometimes and just shake it a whole bunch. And if I only have regular sugar, I'll use that and shake it a whole bunch too. But if you get canned peaches in heavy syrup, I use the syrup from the peaches as my simple syrup. We're going to use ginger beer. You could use ginger beer. You can use seltzer water. You can use Sprite. You can use whatever you like. Again, no perfect in pandemic. We're going to make us a drink real quick, and you all will be able to enjoy that as you go on to your next thing. So what I do is I get an empty glass and I throw some peaches in it. Now, the recipe calls for, I don't know, a half of a large peach or a half a cup. Again, I like flavor forward. So I put as many peaches till my heart is content, and I invite you to do the same into your shaker. There is no perfect in pandemic. We're making drinks for ourselves. So here's my peaches in the bottom. You're gonna grab some mint. It calls for 3 or 4 mint leaves, but I do whatever I want. Again, I like lots of flavor in my drinks, and so I tend to do more. And then you're gonna take these 2 things with a little heavy peach syrup. So they say about an ounce, ounce and a half, again, till your heart's content, and you're gonna give it a little muddle. Now, here's what's interesting. You don't want to bruise mint leaves. So you don't want to, get in there. You really just want to softly muddle it. Just be nice to it. Again, if I didn't have my handy dandy muddler, I would just use my handy dandy spoon that's kind of hanging out in my peaches right now, right here. And I would just smash the peaches gently against the side of the glass. Ladies and gents, folks that are with me, we are almost done this drink. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to get a little lemon. And I actually squeeze my lemon, and I tend to use a little bit of it for garnish. So I take about 1/4 of that lemon, and then it'll slide out ever so nicely like this, ta-da. And I squeeze a little bit into the drink. It's already looking good. Now, because I'm a bartender, I don't measure when I pour liquor, right? What you would do, the drink calls for 2 ounces of your favorite whiskey or bourbon. 2 ounces, if you don't have that handy, that's a 1/4 cup. So if I had my 1/4 cup, I'm not going to stop the tape to go get it. I would do that, but we're going to eyeball that. There's 1 ounce, there's 2 ounces, and that's great. Now, you see that handy dandy glass of ice that I have? Again, you can use a stir if you don't have a shaker, but since I do, I'm going to get the shaker. That goes in together. Give it a really good shake if you want it really cold. Next. If you want to be fancy, you can get brand new ice cubes so that they never touched anything, but I'm not fancy today and I like ice cubes. I actually like the ice cubes from my drink into the glass. So the drink goes into the glass. You see all those peaches, all the wonderful mint that we put in there, and then your ginger beer, your Sprite, your seltzer water, whatever you want. You're gonna splash it up. I like the ginger beer because it gives it a little bite. You do it to your heart's content. If you're feeling froggy and you wanna garnish with mint, have at it. If you're not feeling froggy, sometimes just for the look of it, I will garnish with just a little bit of a lemon wedge. If I use fresh peaches or had fresh peaches around, I might do a little peach on the side. And then I have that and I might give it to somebody I love, or I probably am gonna drink it myself. So simple. Usually you can find these ingredients at home. And I hope that you liked it. And I hope that you join me in making a bourbon peach smash. Let's see how it tastes. The girl still got it. Take care. Have a great time. And again, thank you all so much for inviting me. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much, Tiki. You still got it. And we are so excited to now be able to usher all of you into our virtual theater so that you can view the beautiful show that our Young Artists of America have completed. So what we're going to do is you're going to go into the chat and you're going to see the link to our Give Butter page. You do not need to close out of Zoom. All we ask is that you make sure that your mic is muted if you have a mic on, and that you just enjoy the show in the new link. When you click on that link, a new window will open up, and then we're going to give you just a couple minutes to get there and to settle in, and then you'll hear someone on Zoom tell you when to press play. The image at the top will show a triangle, and at that moment, when you hear us give you that go instruction, you're going to press play and we'll all enjoy the show together. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this pre-show. And now enjoy the wonderful production that is Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies.